Welcome to our monthly ACTS Town Hall. Thanks to our member companies for helping make these town halls possible. Your support makes our mission a reality. Together in safety, stronger in collaboration. The ACTS Town Halls are an open forum to discuss concerns and present potential solutions to improve damage prevention and excavation safety. These town halls are meant to be a discussion, and you're encouraged to ask questions and share solutions. A recording of this town hall will be posted on our YouTube channel and sent via email after the town hall has concluded. Before the end of the town hall, each of our panelists will highlight a moving forward step to ensure we stay focused on practical and impactful solutions. We are pleased to have a knowledgeable and experienced panel with us today. So to get us started, our moderator will begin with brief introductions.
All right, good morning, everyone. So welcome to the Town Hall. My name is Nick Bonstell, and I am the CEO of MISTIG 811, and that is in the state of Michigan. So I always have to bring that up because sometimes that gets a little confused of what state we're in. So MISTIG 811, state of Michigan. And I'll be facilitating today's overall discussion. Today we are talking about positive response. And we really need to ask ourselves a fundamental question when we're thinking about this today on this town hall. And that question is, are positive response codes and tools designed primarily to tell the excavator what they need to know, or have they become a tool to describe and do other things? So to dig into this, we have a panel of three awesome industry experts, all excavators who deal with the realities of these systems on a daily basis. So we'll go through and we'll introduce each one of our panelists. So Billy, if you would like to go first.
Thanks, Nick. Hey, everybody. I'm Billy Kidd. I'm the Regional Vice President over recruiting, HSEQ, and learning development for Southeast Connections. Been in the natural gas industry for about 26 years, started as a laborer, worked my way up like most do. Once led and was the president of a trade school for power linemen, telecommunication workers, and natural gas professionals. And currently, I serve the Southeast region of the United States. We're a gas contractor, underground contractor as well. So there's many tickets called in per year. So we're excited about the relationships we're building here and the conversation today. Thank you, Nick.
Awesome. Looking forward to the conversation with you too, Billy. Kemp, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Kemp Garcia, run a company called Dig Law Advocates. We help contractors and utilities as it revolves around one, safety, damage prevention first and foremost. But then we also help on the back end of helping out if there's damage claims that happen and try to mitigate those is what our focus is. We also have another company called the Integrated Group, which is a third-party safety company for construction companies for the most part. Been in the vac truck world, actually started my life as a private utility locator. I've been doing that for 30 plus years, and then jumped into the vac truck world, stayed in the private locating world. It wasn't until about 2 years ago I kind of jumped out and started doing this other gig because I've been fielding calls from contractors for a long time about what do I do? What do I do if I get a claim, or what do I do? How do I protect myself going forward? But I've also been president of NUCA Washington. We've been teaching a class called Dig Safe for the last 16 years. Teaching everybody about the dig law in the state of Washington. And then last is thanks to everybody. I'm also the Damage Prevention Hero of the Year award last year. So with ACTS Global. So thank you. I'm done now. Off to Dustin.
I was there and witnessed that, Kemp, so I can verify that is accurate. So congratulations as well, and well deserved.
Yeah, and see you here in August, I think, right?
We will. Yep, we'll see you again in August. All right, and last but definitely not least, Dustin, go ahead.
I'm Dustin Asher with Tri-State Utility Contractors. we've been excavating in the south for 25 years. I've been in the natural gas industry since 1995. I kind of watched the dig law change a whole lot over them 30 years, right? And see the focus change of it. And so just glad to be here today. Dug a whole lot of holes in the ground and cut quite a few things along the way that weren't marked and a few that were. And so just looking forward to our conversation today.
Dustin, I love that. I love all the changes and stuff. There's been a lot of changes since '95. So looking forward to I always think about these conversations is not just changing today, but how are we setting up the next generation? How are we setting up our kids for their success in the future? And I think we'll find that as we go through today. So I really want to start off with just getting a reality check, just kind of level setting. How are these codes currently functioning in the field today? And Billy, I'm going to probably direct the first question to you is, which positive response codes provide the most useful information and which ones provide the least amount of information in your view?
Yeah, Nick, good question. Something I'll touch on before I answer that is one thing I always want to touch on is Dustin talked about it. Lots changed. It's a different gas business than we grew up in. A lot more regulations, a lot more things underground. Back when we did it, we've all said that 100 times. It was a lot different, right? We're not pulling things out of the ground. We're putting in things in the ground. So what we dealt with 20, 30 years ago is a lot different than what we're dealing with today. So I have empathy for the team members out there digging in today's regulatory world and utility world than when I was doing it. They're a lot tougher than I am. But with that being said, I think it starts with, before I go into the question again, is training, right? We expect and have expectations that people understand what these codes are, what they mean. We feel like it should be pretty common sense, but have we really broke it down to what they mean and what's the responsibility of 811? What's the responsibility of an excavator that's breaking the earth? And what's the responsibility of the utilities and the operators? So I think it's a three-legged stool and we all sort of have to be in it together. And so once again, I'll say it, I appreciate these kind of conversations. But to answer your question, I would say, does it help my crews understand whether we can safely proceed? And that's the biggest part. Is it safe to move forward? And to do that, the most useful codes, that I would say provide the clearest outcome would be more like, marked with exception, marked facility located, because there's really no gray there, right? It was located. Someone showed up on that site, located it. It's either a good locate, a bad locate. It was either marked correctly or it was mismarked. They were able to use the mapping. They were able to use their locator, and they're saying, hey, they were there. We locate it. So when I go on site, I have comfort knowing that hopefully a professional was there prior to me. And then with my training as a contractor, I'm going to verify that with my own locate equipment just to see if we're seeing eye to eye. I'm going to hopefully check my GPS mapping with that customer as well and go, all right, this adds up. This adds up. They're saying this. I'm saying this. I feel comfortable now moving to non-aggressive digging, using my white line processes, hand digging, using an air knife, a vac truck, and staying out of that, depending 2-foot tolerance zone and, depending on the state and the utility. So I would say those ones. And then also another one, delayed response, delay requested. Okay, that means I need to stop, right? We say stop work authority. Do we really understand what that means when it comes to locates, right? We understand that if someone's digging in the tolerance zone or using aggressive digging and it's breaking, state laws, federal laws, and our internal processes, But do they understand that starts with the locate ticket, right? Like it ain't right, hold up. So that's another one. And then I would say, the other things that we're looking at is, are the facilities present? Have they been marked? Are there limitations or expectations to what that ticket says? And can we excavate and move forward? So I would say them 3 or 4 codes would be the ones that I would say probably have the most impact and are the easiest to understand if I was a new foreman in the field today.
I like that. And this next question is going to go to Dustin. It's going to kind of put a little bit of different spin on that, and it really is the most common code out there. So, Dustin, the most common code that you're going to usually see on positive response is a clear no conflict. When a locator posts that in the systems that you're operating, the states you're operating, how much confidence do you put into that? And what are some of the things or actions you might do in addition to that to get that level of comfort?
Well, I would say in the areas I work in, it depends how much stock I take, and that would depend on who the locate company is, who the utility provider is. Because in our area, we have I'm not calling a name, but we have 1 or 2 that if they put clear no conflict, that's probably just because they didn't want to go out there and mark. It has nothing to do whether it was clear or not. And so, with that being said, most of the time we're going to look at who've done the clear no conflict. We're probably going to make a site visit and verify is that correct before we ever stick a shovel in the ground. Because we just got to make sure. And I know that we see clear no conflict on the first ticket. And then if we happen to be in the area a long time and we do an update or change the ticket a little bit, the next ticket will say marked. Well, how's it clear no conflict? We're in the same area. The very next ticket say marked. So it just depends on the company. Now we got a bunch of companies that are really good. If they say clear no conflict, there's nothing there. And I like to see that. Means we don't have as much to deal with. But in the world we live in and work in, it's probably not the case in most applications. And so we do a lot of documentation even after the ticket says we're good. Our crews show up on site and we're going to take picture of every telephone pole, handhold, pedestal, gas meter with the marks before we ever start excavation. So that's kind of how we handle that. I do like to see clear no conflict, but most of the time it's probably not that way.
So what I'm hearing from you, and I just want to repeat it back to see if this is kind of accurate, your response there is your level of confidence in that clear no conflict goes off of your past experience with who's providing it.
That's correct.
Okay. So let's
Can I
talk
just
a
add to
little.
that real quick, Nick?
Absolutely, Ken. Yes, please.
I had a contractor call me earlier, or well, in May anyway, and exactly that. I was out in Spokane area, Washington, and the contractor called me and said, "Hey, we got an issue. This line says clear, no conflict," and I said, "Okay, you should be free to dig, right?" He's like, "Well, it also says in the law we can't dig until all known utilities have been located." Well, we installed that line. We know it's in the area, so it's kind of hard for them to do it. So, and then they called the locator, and he was in a remote location, and said he wouldn't be there for another 4 hours to locate it. But clearing from the couch is not a safe effort. So sorry to interrupt.
And just to be clear, like you never are interrupting. This is a 100% panel discussion. We want to hear those things. We want that thought to be encouraged. So anytime, jump in anytime with any questions that we have. It actually flows into the next question I have very, very nicely. And that is about just talking about the operational impact. So obviously, you guys are contractors, you're out in the field, you're excavators, you're working. Ambiguity is something that's not just frustrating, but it's also costly. And, one of the main things is it could impact safety. So Kemp, over to you. Before excavation, what information do you need most from the positive response system And how is this information communicated? And this is the caveat at the actual job site.
Yeah, I'll say our law just made for positive response in the state of Washington just to January 1st this year. There was a lot of utilities were already voluntarily doing positive response, which was a huge help. And I think positive response is a huge help in damage prevention, as it creates some sort of communication that we haven't had in the past across the board, across all states. It was either there was paint on the ground or there wasn't paint on the ground. So every state that passed positive response, I applauded them. A lot of contractors don't like it because they say, my days are up. I'm allowed to dig. If I hit something, I hit something. But I don't see that as a win in damage prevention.
No.
So with that, agreed. As how do you inform the people out in the field? And that's the hard sell, because a lot of your people out in the field, they don't see the tickets, they don't see the email response that comes across because they weren't the ones who initiated the ticket. I'm not sorry, but I'm gonna plug a company, but I've got contractors now, and they add me to it so I can monitor it. But they're using a management system called 811 Spotter, and that has availability for everybody to see it. You see a map. If it's red, you're not digging. If it's yellow, you need more information that needs to be played into it. If it's green, you're good to go. And they monitor that. The system monitors that, and it's just an easy system flow. And as a lot of states, not every state, but a lot of states use different ticket management software. And in a lot of those situations, it's not just on a map. You got to look up each individual ticket. So with that, then it makes it a little bit more cumbersome out in the field. So if you have one sole source to be able to get to and see it, it does help. And it gets those people out in the field to be able to say, hey, I'm rolling out to a yellow. What are we missing? And so that's my quick answer to it. But a whole 100% agree. A positive response is no good unless the guy who's putting the shovel in the bucket in the ground actually can view it.
I'd like to add something what we do. I know, because getting it to the field is a big deal, right? They got to know. And so they review it in our office. I tell you what we do. We have a in-house, that ticket gets forwarded to a group. And so all of our supervisors have every ticket. Of course, in Mississippi, we have to have the ticket on site. That's a law, part of the law. And so every person has that ticket, and they're searchable once they're in that email. So we can search them by address and find any ticket and look at that positive response. I think that what I would like to see is all the positive responses. I may be getting ahead, but I'll say this anyways, because all the positive responses in one area versus having to go to the web, because sometimes where we work, it's remote. There's not good cell service. And going to the web to look at a ticket is a problem sometimes. So just for us, but we do have access like that. And I'm definitely going to look into this 811 Spotter you talked about, Kemp, because I had not heard of that.
Yeah, and I want to jump in on this one too, because it is a concern and it is a barrier to our crews, right? And so a couple things. One, and it could be considered check the box, but I'm sure hoping it's not, is on our JHAs, it's, do you have the locate ticket? Have you went over it with your crew? And let's all be honest, we're hoping that's happening. We're evaluating that during our safety audits and our coaching and different things like that. But the other thing that I seen just last week, I was at the Texas Gas Association and I sat in on a 811 breakout session. And there was another contractor that I respect that has a system in place that their 811 ticket, when they call it in, it goes to 811. And then when it bounces back the email, it automatically geofences and uses an API to go right into that work order on that foreman's iPad. And then it closes it out when that job's done as well. And I thought, man, that's pretty slick. So that's something I took from that Texas Gas Association, came back, and I've actually scheduled some meetings to look into that a little more because, one, safety is number one. We know that. Productivity, it's right there with it with a contractor, as you guys know. So any efficiencies like that where we don't have back office staff tied down, calling in relocates on a job that might be completed already. Plus, we put the locate in the foreman's hands in real time, and as it changes, I mean, that's a win-win.
It's interesting. I've actually heard a couple things. So one of the key reasons why I thought moderating this would be really kind of fun and interesting is it's free input for me on how we design future functions of our system, right? So, hearing from the excavators, the folks using the products in the field, I think the two takeaways that I just heard from that conversation was we like it visual. We like it visual in one place on a map. And we like it simple. So we like it color coded, and we like the green, yellow, red. Is that something that resonates with all you guys in the field?
Yeah, I would say that and white, right? Proposed, because depending on the state, the polygram of your locate, that covers your area. Back in the day, we'd stick a white flag, 50-foot radius, whatever. And I understand that makes it tough, but we don't always get to walk our jobs before we're on site. We sure wish we could, but a lot of times we're looking overhead, using Google and all the things that go with it, or customer mapping. In some states, it's the law to white line it and do the locate, do white line it on site. So any technology that can make it all in one, where maybe you white line inside your area on the computer and it shows it, because when you get out there, you don't know where it's plumbed out. You may not know where it's kicked out. The main may have showed on the front side. It could be on the back. And all of a sudden you got a crew that just drove 2 hours to go out there and do it. That just shuts down all productivity. And then we have to figure out what to do with that crew. We got to go back, we got to wait the new response time, which depending on the state, 48 hours, 72, you got to figure that out. And so I think the upfront part with 811, depending on the state, the consistency would sure help. And I imagine we'll get to that, but that's just something that triggered me thinking about that.
Go ahead, Cam.
Yeah, so I was just going to add to that is, I'm going off the CGA study that said that anywhere between 30 to 70%, they cut it in half and say 50% are locates are late. That's why we need positive response. And that's one of the reasons. There's multiple reasons, obviously, but that's a huge reason. Just like Billy said, is we need to know if it's complete before we mow out crews, because if we can't mow crews, if we see, we have a red light or a yellow light, it's like, okay, we now need to start making some phone calls to get those utilities located, and before we mow those crews, and we don't waste that time that Billy just talked about, because that's a production killer that nobody's going to pay for except for the company that's trying to do the excavating.
Exactly. No, I totally agree. We actually, 2 years ago, we started developing GIS dashboards, visual GIS dashboards. And it's amazing when you say to someone, hey, there's 220,000 active tickets in the system, versus their reaction when you show them 220,000 polygons overlaid on a map. It's two completely different thought processes that are triggered in the head, because 220,000 is kind of like just a number, but when you actually visualize it and you look at the work and you integrate the positive response into it, it turns into a completely different picture. So I think pictures are really big, and visualization in GIS is the future of kind of where we're all going. Billy, you actually brought up, I think, something that we probably need to dig a little bit deeper into. And, both Billy and Dustin, I would put you guys kind of in the same category. Kemp, I'm sure you've worked across state lines too. But Billy and Dustin, you guys are both contractors who work in multiple states. What insights can you give us on different systems that you operate and which parts of these are the most efficient or best in class in your view as you operate throughout different states?
Yeah, and that is something, when you're working in, you know, almost all 50 states and like you said, you're moving crews around. You got to educate them on not just the state regulations, but also the operators because they can go above and beyond what the state and what the laws are. So I would say, working across multiple states gives, us a unique perspective to a contractor or someone that works in one state, because one of the biggest challenges is the inconsistencies. And I think I talked to one 48-hour response, the other 72, and so how do we educate our crews on which is which, or a back office. And also I'll tell you the other thing is it can cause confusion when you're moving a crew state to state or a new customer. I would say the thing that probably works the best is the systems that simplify it, to be honest, and maybe are cohesive with each other and talking across state lines and different things. Maybe someone that used to work for this system and now works for this system, and instead of saying ours is better, they may have a different approach of like, hey, have we tried it or have we thought about that? So I guess the best systems aren't necessarily the ones with the most codes, and they're not the ones that have every excavator, locator, and utility company, but the ones that understand what each response means and how it affects us. Because like I said, I've said in some meetings where, I heard it over and over that white lining is the law. You have to go out and white lining. And a contractor in the back of the room was like, that's just about impossible when we have 25,000 locate tickets for us to get on that site every time. There's got to be a digital way to make your life easier, but also to make our life easier where we don't have a runner for every job or a field engineer to go to every job. So I think another best practice is making it easy to find, right? We're already going through packets or digital, customer packets, customer GPS. Adding another layer to that, it just really isn't user friendly sometimes. So, I'll leave some meat on that bone for Dustin, but that's just some of the things we're seeing.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say I found, we work in a 6-state area. I wouldn't say anybody's got it all right. There's things we like better about this state and don't like, but I won't say that there's not anything necessarily bad. I know in-house, what we do in that 6-state footprint, we have the first thing to do when somebody walks in our door is the state they're going to be working in. They're required to read the 811 law in that state and take a quiz. If they don't pass it, they're reading it again because we found, I talk to locators and they tell me, well, you're doing this wrong. And I've asked, have you read the law? They're locating for a law that they've never read. And so I think education is huge, that we have to educate these folks that's not been in the industry, maybe not been a part of the industry. They have to understand how that law reads and what is required of them. And then in-house, we have built a separate policy that this is our policy and it falls under all 6 states' laws that we work in, so that this is what we live by. And it's over and beyond the state laws. Like our policy is, if we're looking for a utility, we was talking about this early before we started, but our policy is we're digging 36 inches each side of that mark to look for that line. We're not digging with an excavator until we have done that. And that number works for us in our 6-state footprint. Now I realize you might have to change it, but that's our internal policy. So that way, when we move a crew state to state, we're already over and above the law. And then we're not digging until we've got our positive responses. And we keep, I don't know how many tickets we got today. We keep lots of tickets because we got lots of people working. And right here within 100 miles of the office, we have a person that's their job to ride and check tickets against positive responses and take pictures of the site so that we don't dispatch a crew, because sometimes the information is not correct. Sometimes, like you were saying earlier, Kemp, we installed the line and somebody's telling us there's no line there, and we know there's a line there. So we have to verify those things before we start digging. And I feel like we do a pretty good job, but we're constantly educating. And we're involved with each state we work in, their 811 system, going to the different classes they offer, putting people in them, going to the different summits in the different states, trying to make sure we're a part and we know as the different things change and our people understand how important this is.
Dustin, that's very insightful from like your internal policy standpoint of looking at all the factors and coming up with something that meets all of them or exceeds them, instead of training, just to the bare minimum. That's pretty awesome. Kemp, anything you want to add on this topic?
I think just the same thing Billy said is sometimes simpler is better. I've seen different states that have 20 different response codes, and I think it's a situation where even as a locator, they're trying to close out that ticket. And I mean, I'm just in a vision as being a locator closing out a ticket. Either they're just going to say, this is what I say every time and whatnot, or do they actually go through all 20 codes and say, I think this one fits here, I don't think this one fits there, kind of thing. I just try to make it as simple as possible.
All right. Whitney, I see you have your hand up. Are there some questions on the board from the audience?
Yeah, there are a few questions that came in, so I wanted to address them before we get too far down.
Yeah.
The first of which kind of has two parts, and I know, Dustin, you had addressed the second part a little bit, but the first question is, what are some of the best practices you see with using positive response and would encourage others to consider? And the second part, specifically for excavators, is, do you prefer to go on the website and check for positive response, or do you prefer they are emailed to you as they arrive from each utility?
Ooh, those are good questions. Who wants to go?
I'll start here. Like everybody's been saying, simple is better. I'm not going to fuss if we get a notification from each, because the states we work in, we don't necessarily, we have to go to the website, and that's a problem a lot of times. For us, we work through it. We'll get there. We'll get the information, but one place, and I would say from the locator standpoint, when you're using a positive response, if you want an on-site meeting, we're great with that. Give us a contact number. I think the most we see on-site meeting all the time, and then I have to reach out to 811 and say, hey, they requested an on-site meeting, but they didn't give us a contact. I don't know who to call. I don't know whose area this is. I need you to give me the tools I need to be successful with what you want, right? And so I think that kind of all flows into that. But the positive response is a great tool since it's been mandatory. I guess we went mandatory. It's been almost a year here in Mississippi, but it's just getting everybody to put the right information. And I think the least amount of codes, the simpler. It's either marked, it's not marked, it's delayed, or you want to meet me. I don't know that we need much more than that, right? Because it just needs to be simple. Because when I say, and we get this it says marked, but exception. Well, your exception and my exception is different. We may not even be working on that area where you have this exception. We need to know be clear, because sometimes we tend to live in our own world where I'm dealing with the gas, or I'm dealing with the electric, I'm dealing with the water. And we forget that there's other people involved that may not use the same terminology we use, may look at something different. And it's a team effort. Give me some contact numbers. We'll reach out.
Billy, I saw you come off mute as well there.
Yeah, and I agree. The other thing that I would ask it, as a large contractor, it really depends on your people. And as a professional, dole educator in the past as well, everybody learns different. So some are good with technology, some are good with iPads, and then you have some people that want to see that in their packet in paper. And it really goes back to also what the customer's request is, because some still require paper in every packet compared to digital. And so to answer that question, which do you prefer? I would say it really depends on what area you're working in and what that foreman's comfort level is, because a positive work environment where they're comfortable and confident in what they're looking at transitions into safety and putting the pipe in and keeping everybody safe. So you really have to pay attention to your audience.
That's a good point. Kemp.
Yeah. On the I would like to see the responses not via email. When I call in locates, you get you've got multiple tickets out there, and then you end up getting 5, 6, 10 emails per ticket. It just is too inundating. So having a clearinghouse spot to find it is a better avenue than getting multiple emails. It doesn't transcend very well.
All right. Thank you, audience, for the questions. Keep them coming as we go on about this. Anything that you guys want, let us know. We're going to move on to best practices in the future. So we've talked about the problems. Now is the fun part. We get to talk about our solutions and our thoughts around those solutions. If we want this system to work for the folks who are actually digging, we need to learn more about the specific ways, like we just talked about, that they use it. So, Kemp, I'm going to ask, this question is going to go to you. And with your advocacy background, I want to start with you on this, but I personally believe that the system should work for those, I'm going to go to a previous career, but closest to the pipe. I think that the people who have this information closest to the actual excavation is where safety is aligned the best. So in many cases, I see the review of this information really being accomplished through offsite administrative practices in some cases, and would love to get it more on the job site itself. So what specific pieces of information, structure, format are really missing that we could build or include that would get it closer to the pipe, as we say, closer to the excavator doing the work? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. I obviously, first and foremost, is education to those individuals out in the field. I hate to say it, we're all dirt diggers to some degree. Doesn't matter if you're a utility or an actual excavator. They're one and the same a lot of times. But it really starts with, like I said, the education. Most of the people out in the field that are doing the digging are the last link. They don't have that information. You hear from locators all the time that they want the person out in the field to be the one that actually called in to locate. In situations like Dustin or Billy, I'm sure that's just not always available. The person out in the field isn't the one going to be called in to locate. You have somebody like Dustin said, I believe it was that you have somebody that drives around and they're calling the tickets, they're monitoring them, they're seeing what's going on. That's a good process through that, but you just need to have education for that for those guys out in the field, because they're given a work order, they're supposed to go dig, but we need to get something in front of them. What is that education? Is it going to a state class? Is it reading the law? Is it getting more involved? I try to tell people is, just because you dig, just because you run a vac truck, there's more to it than just that. You need to buy into the system. And I've heard plenty of excavators say, well, if I hit it, I hit it, kind of thing. We don't want that. That's not damage prevention. So, it's a simple, my answer is simple. I'm sure there's much more, a bigger answer, but it really starts with education.
Thank you.
I
Go ahead.
want to go ahead and agree 100%. Is it starts with education and knowledge sharing and behaviors, because Kip just touched on both. They may have the knowledge and skills, but their behavior is sort of, fixed mindset. Hey, they didn't mark it, we're going to go in there and get after it. They're responsible because they didn't mark it, or whatever they may think. But I'll just give you some best practices or structure we put to it. During orientation, 811, we have training on that, training awareness. We have damage response training. We partner with state 811s to come in and educate our teams with our safety professionals and trainers. And then we do things like toolbox talks and things like that go out, on Monday morning huddles and different things. And then we also like to do some chunking education, where that's just 2, 3, 4 minute info sessions that remind people about 811 state laws, what positive response is, and the importance of it. So I think it's not you do it one time and then you let it go and they're educated on it. I think it's constant reminder, and it becomes part of the culture, and then it ties to the JHA. Then it ties to, hey, these marks are faded. It ties into, hey, we need to call in a update. It sort of avalanches in a good way if you start at the front.
Looks like we do have Whitney online here again, so go ahead, Whitney.
Yeah, we have a couple audience questions that came in to address. So 2 I'll address right now. The first one is, has anyone on the panel seen a positive response code successfully used in another state or 811 center that specifically addresses adverse weather conditions? And then another good one came in, just kind of surrounding a discussion on reinforcing consistent language in positive response systems across the board.
Okay, so let's start with the weather one. Has anyone seen a code associated with weather activity in the area?
We have, here in the South, we had that last winter, had the 2 weeks of ice and nobody got out. And they paused a lot of tickets, but at the same time, we're a utility provider. We had to have locates. We were at work, not every day, but when there was a problem, we were out in the mess, and we had to call and say, hey guys, you're going to have to come mark a ticket. We've got to have these marks, because at that point in time here in the South, we don't get a lot of that stuff. And the grid was stressed to its capacity for us to go out and be working on one problem, to create another one would have been this huge, and they're like, we can't get out. Well, fine. You guys got more than one locator. Find somebody that can, and let's get them over here, right? And I get not wanting to be out, but from a utility, when we're dealing with gas, power, water, whatever, or even now communications with everybody's internet running. I mean, we're using it today, right? It's important that you come out no matter the weather condition, especially on an emergency ticket. But I have seen it not because of adverse weather, but I've seen it work well because it lets us know, hey, it's not marked.
All right, thanks, Dustin. Any other input from the panel on those 2 thoughts or questions?
That is not one of our codes, but we all know it rains in Washington. We have snow too. So that's always one of the concerns. I mean, actually, I tell all my contractors, put on their ticket that do not locate in the rain. Is because we don't want bad paint or paint to be washed away, which that's a couple cases I'm fighting right now. But I think that's a good one. I'm going to go to our executive director for Washington 811 and tell them I think that's maybe one we need to put in there. So I think that's it's definitely needed.
All right. Like it. Love the questions. Keep them coming. So we are seeing some states take action, and they're really trying to make the system as user friendly as possible, and they're trying to add value to it. So, for example, some states are creating systems to upload supporting documentation like photos, sketches, maps, to the positive response system that the excavator would then receive and be able to use within their decision-making process. So this question goes to Billy, and the question is, would photo or map attachments help with some of these issues, or would they create new problems? What is your view from the site? Oh, and I think you're on mute there still, Billy.
Yep, I got you. That's a good question. I would say, I think photos and map attachments would probably have great potential, but probably only should be used as an enhancement, a bolt-on. You know what I mean? You just can't rely just on that. Don't replace them. Don't replace a positive response with pictures, right? Of course, I would think from a field perspective, photos could, provide some more clarity, maybe immediate clarity. But if there's like an unusual site or condition, and maybe a difficult access point or missing landmarks or questions about, where the marks were placed. I mean, a photo could probably answer that quickly, just like on the back end, I mean, picture, I think they say says 1,000 words type of deal, depending on the picture. I think maps and probably sketches could be valuable too, especially on like a larger project where, the facilities and alignment on, the plan and the excavation would sort of help you plan your job because you could visually see what's out there. And once again, you're not just going to lean only on that, but introducing some of those attachments, I think would have, because we're already doing it with Google Earth and different things that we're pulling up ourselves. So why not have it as a different approach, a bolt on? So I think, sounds pretty generic, but really photos can capture the moment in time, prior, mid, after. A lot of liability, a lot of claims come out of it, of course, the safety. And as we know, conditions, just like Kip was saying, can change rapidly. It was beautiful when we started or prior. In the middle, we got rain or snow, and the project's, a month long. So things can change pretty quickly. So we all understand that the records have limitations. So I think the more positive response, pictures, sketches, maps, and then communication, I think, are all a recipe for a more successful project. And it goes back to what I said, the confidence of the excavator going out there and doing the job correctly and not going, what if, man, that's unclear, I'm not sure, this is real ambiguous. So I think it's just another layer of information that would be positive to the process.
Thanks,
sorry. I'll add to that is last year at the Axe Global Summit conference there in Dallas, is I raised my hand and said, what kind of technology can help for damage prevention? And I raised my hand and said, it's not new technology. Adding pictures and having contractors have access to those pictures. And a guy from Washington Energy came up to me the day later, and he told me that they started doing that a few years ago, I think, and he said their damages went down by 50%. I mean, but that being said, the contractors need to actually look at that, just like positive response. They've got to be able to look at it if they have access to it. Our local energy company is looking to do that enhanced positive response. I just talked to their claims department last week, and one of their claims agents, and she asked me, she said, well, don't contractors have access to those pictures? Because if the line was painted in the rain on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, contractor wasn't out there because they took that week off. They came back Monday, paint was gone, and they hit the gas line. So if they had that access to those pictures, they would have taken a look at it and say, hey, we're missing something right here. And would have reduced that potentially. Again, it's got to be used, but potentially reduced that damage or eliminated that damage. So I think access to that is paramount. I had a water district on their ticket response. It said it had a AWS, it was a link of some sort, but you couldn't just click on the link. You had to copy and paste it into the web browser, but they didn't even know they were already doing enhanced positive response. They added it to it. And so they were in my class, and I said, okay, let's do that real quick, and opened it up. There's all the detail of their ticket that's part of their system, and then the pictures that went with it. It's again, as long as it's used, it's going to reduce and or eliminate damages.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that too, because the life cycle of that asset, right? So up front, you have them pictures above ground, then you got verification through the call, and then what's where we're headed and most are doing, we're getting better at it, is then there's pictures of what's actually under the ground if it's new enough. So now you got above ground, you got below ground, you got your locate, you got your verification of locate. Now you got your hand digging, you got your culture, your behavioral piece where we're soft digging, where we're backing, where we're air knifing, and things like that. So once again, that's a recipe for safe, reliable underground construction right there. So I agree with all that too.
Great conversation. Dustin, I got one last question for you before we go into our roundtable and close. And it's kind of a fun question. It is, if you could completely redesign the positive response system tomorrow from the ground up, strictly from the excavator's perspective, what is the very first thing you would change?
That's a good question. I think the first thing I would say is, let's get it as simple as we can. And I think that's where everybody's trying to do anyways, right? And we need a few codes. We don't need 150 codes of why it's not marked or whatever. Let's keep it simple. Let's get it visible in one location that's easy to access, whether it's sent out on, one email, or it's sent out, or there's a way that we access it, or I don't know how we'll get it there, but where it's simple, it's easy to access, and it's easily understood. Because sometimes we get things in so I think the pictures would help, these different things we're talking about, whether if they add those, we could do that. I think there's certain areas where it might complicate it, but I think in most of the time, as long as we're simple, it would be great. And just simplify it and make it easy to access. And just remembering that, like I say, some customers still got to do it all on paper. Some are all digital. Some people can use a phone well, or a tablet or a computer. Others do not. And so I think that's what I would say. And there's just a common ground we're going to have to hit right there. And I think everybody's trying to do that, right? I don't think anybody's out there saying we're just trying to make it hard. But from Excavator, the phone doesn't, our internet, we don't always have live internet on job sites, right? We think that we do. And we're in one, and we were on one over the last few weeks, and all my guys were fussing they couldn't get to anything on their phones, but yet they could make a phone call, but the data connection was not any good where they were. And so I think that's just one of the problems we have to work through, but simplify as simple as we can get it with the most amount of information you can give us.
Okay, so I'm gonna take simplification away from that statement. That's what I'm taking, is
right.
Simplify. That's what I'm getting. So we are coming up to the end of this hour, and I want to make sure that we close on time with our folks who are joining us today as participants. I want to specifically thank Kemp, Billy, and Dustin for, bringing your guys' valuable field experience to the discussion. To wrap up, based on everything we've discussed today, if we could just go around and just, what's your one key takeaway that you took from the conversation today, and maybe a last point that you want people to remember? And we'll just go through and close here. So, Billy, we'll start with you.
All right. Well, we're going to say it again. I think the biggest takeaway is that excavators are not looking for more information. We're looking for better information in a sense. And, every day our crews are out there making critical decisions that affect, the safety of the communities, the public, the reliability of the energy source that we're producing, and the project cost, right? Everything comes down to money, in the world we live in. So when they're standing on the job, they really don't want to work or concentrate on, what happened during the back office part of it. They're focused on what's in front of them. And so I think if we can relieve some of that anxiety and some of that stress off them and let them focus on, the technical skills, the knowledge that they bring, and being tradespeople that they are, I think that's going to go a long ways. I think the positive response system should probably be designed around helping the people closest to the work and to make those decisions, right? It's easy for someone like me to, sit in an office and been there, done that, and tell war stories and turn into a storyteller. But at the end of the day, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not the one out there being the doer and putting the pipe in the ground. So I'm looking at ways to make my guys and my people's jobs easier in the field. So I think if we focus on providing like a clear, actionable, field-related information based off calls like this, I think everyone will benefit state to state, not just the contractors. I'm talking the utility owners and the public. So I think the goal and what we took out today is, should not really just be simple, but it should be, compliant, simple, and then collaborative, not just state to state, but as we say, all the assets combined. Let's get in a group and get some consistency around what we're doing.
I love that you brought up the public in your thought process. That's pretty cool. Kemp?
I think, basically, I think we've discussed it, and we said the same word every topic we talked about, or every session we talked about, is simple. Just keep that going. But again, like Billy said, but it needs to be simple, but it also needs to be utilized. It needs to be on both sides. I have seen a bunch of utilities with our positive response that are not responding, or they're either, it says does not respond, or they're not responding, or they're like we've talked about at the beginning, they're saying clear, no utility in the area, but evidently there are. So we got to utilize it on both sides so that we do reduce damages. We do not just go into it blind. I mean, like we have been over the years until positive responses got into each individual state. So I just think if it's used correctly on both sides, we're in a better communication, a better avenue. And if we get to a point where enhanced positive response is available, we're even that much better. And then we get into a point where these the locators who are using RTK units, then maybe that's added to it as a mapping process in that enhanced positive response. And I know that they're looking to get there. I just don't know. I saw that model 10 plus years ago, so it would be great to be able to have that.
Thank you, Kemp, for being with us and sharing your knowledge as well. Really appreciate it. Dustin?
And I'm just jotting some notes here, and these kind of come up in every topic we talked about. So I think it needs to be simple. We've got to educate. We've got to stay compliant, collaborative, and then it has to be for everyone, the excavator, the locator, and the owner. And I think that's what these town halls do. And so I think we're all on the same page. It's just continuing all of us to work toward those goals and whatever part of this puzzle ours is. Because we need lots of people to understand it. And we're not going to do that without educating our own people, being simple, compliant, collaborative.
Guys, I really appreciate your time on the panel. I have learned a lot today. Obviously, we can't design systems without the input of the people who use them every single day. So really appreciate your feedback. Whitney had included a comment in the chat that please fill out the survey and the form. It's the only way we improve and get better. And with that, I just say thanks for joining us today and hope you all have a good rest of your week.